In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It took him 6 days. And after each day, he said his creation was good. Close to the last day, he said, when we created humans, he said it was very good. Science. During 2020, I read a book in a book club during COVID. It was called Does Science Explain Everything by John Lennox. Spoiler, it does not. And through this course, that confirms that belief of mine and that is shared with John Lennox. Through the course, we've learned over amazing topics, and I have enjoyed myself. We talked about the scientific method, and what I can tell you with the scientific method and science itself, humans created it to understand God's wonderful creation. And through this wonderful creation, we also can see something that we are connected to God, because we can create things and we create science to understand God, and it helps us understand what stuff is. We also talked a lot about electricity and safety and how it works, of how when we were a few weeks ago, or earlier in the beginning, we talked about how a socket works and why it dies easily or has warning labels. And I learned why I go through so many electrical sockets, because there's not enough power. And when it meets its max power, it overheats and burns. So we learned about how, I would say that God's creations are perfect. Our creations have flaws because it can't take in as much electricity. We also talked about space, and I loved this because I always wondered if black holes were very much a sucking system, but it's not. Black holes talks about gravity, and you have to kind of fall into the black hole. We talked about Mars and Venus, where the question of was there life there, and will life ever be there? And I think our universe is big enough that where God has created other creations out there, because he developed our world by just saying, let there be light, and there was light. We also went over above Earth and the 4 seasons. We talked about how the different tilts of the axle and how the powerful of sun helps us lean towards either spring or summer, or right now winter, which has been brutal, and different summer, and how the world reacts when you're there. I also learned a little about the equator, how it is very, very hot on the equator where the countries are, and the seasons in the axle really does help us talk about that. We talked about the greenhouse effect I think it was last week or a few weeks ago, talking about how cars overheat, and it's the greenhouse effect when a car overheats. And remember, it's not safe to leave your children or pets in the car. We talked about magna and rocks, and that was really fun because you got to learn about what the different types of rocks are, and I got to learn about what magna actually is, because I was a little confused by that. We also talked about earthquakes, which is really cool to me because I've always wondered what an earthquake is. But to go back to the original thing of I went over almost everything we talked about this in these 8 weeks, and we've learned so much. But going back to the topic of God's great glory in his creation of the world, he said that let there be light, and there was light. And science was created so we could understand stuff we don't understand. Science does not explain everything. And we use science to I see science as a tool to help us understand something we don't understand. People get confused with science and say that there's no God because there's science. But science is really important because it teaches us about how good God is. And last but not least, I also want to talk about how I love the question of, is it possible to make a lightsaber? That was really cool and that was a fun question. But yes, so God is so good, and I was so happy to dive into all his creations throughout these 8 weeks. Thank you. I rambled quite a while.